This is Capital Notes from Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Maayan Silver. Today, we ask J.R. Ross to explain the presidential election results. He's editor of WizPolitics.com. Welcome, J.R. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so you told Lake Effect's Joy Powers right after the election that a lot of Trump's victory in the state and the country comes down to the idea that people are unhappy with the direction of the country and thought Trump would be better for the economy. But on the flip side, more people voted for Harris than only two presidential candidates in Wisconsin history. That's Obama in 2008 and Donald Trump in 2024. Do you know anything else at this point about how this happened?
Oh, sure. I mean, the signs were there. We could see them. People are unhappy about the economy, the direction of the country. Kamala Harris promised change but could not articulate how she'd be a change agent compared to Joe Biden. In fact, there was a very effective ad that Trump ran where she was asked, would you done differently than Biden? And she said, I couldn't think of anything. That doesn't help you when a tough environment. And let's be honest, she faced a difficult task, 107-day campaign. The incumbent that she was tied to is very unpopular. And all the environmental issues that she faced with the economy and immigration, all these things, I'm not sure anybody could have won that race. Everything was in Trump's favor if you think about it from that big picture of how people feel. And I think we talked before about I was watching for, was something going to break in this race? Was something going to really move in the end that would show us what was going on? And we would pretty much know. We would go, oh, of course is what happened. Well, just seeing Trump win, of course it was going to happen when people go, I'm not happy with what's going on in this country. I'm not happy paying so much for my kids' shoes or when I pay in the grocery store. Yes, inflation is down. Yes, there are good things with the unemployment rate, but people still feel that they are not doing well. When people feel unhappy, they take it out, party in power in the White House, and they have to be Democrats, and Kamala Harris is a Democrat. It's not rocket science. Granted, there are things that, this post-mortem, you're going to hear all kinds of teeth gnashing by Democrats about what they did wrong, and Republicans pound their chests about how they've, found this great secret. In the end, it's about the economy and how people feel. And those working class voters who went to Republicans, will they stay there? Or will they swing back or stay home in coming elections if they don't feel as inspired as they were by Donald Trump?
When it comes to Milwaukee, that's Wisconsin's largest metro area. There was a shift rightward among almost all large metro areas in the country. Were you seeing that as well?
Yeah. The interesting thing is that the WOW counties, Waukesha, Ozaukee, Washington, actually did worse for Trump. Now, that is the continued erosion of the suburban vote for Republicans that we've been seeing for 8 straight years now. I'll tell you, on election night, I knew Milwaukee was going to be late because of Central Count and the issues that it had with starting over in 31,000 ballots. So I had in my mind Dane and Waukesha counties as key kind of indicators of what was going to go on, watching those counties to see what came in. And as I'm watching Waukesha County update its numbers and Trump is dropping, not just below 60%, but below 59%, I'm like, how do you win statewide Republican below 59%? I've never seen that before for a Republican or a conservative candidate in a statewide race in Wisconsin. He has created a new path. It's simply, you can not do so well in those counties, those suburban counties, if you cut into the Democratic advantage place like Dane County, where Kamala Harris is below 75%, and have a surge in rural areas, which he had. The question is, can any other Republican replicate that formula? Ron Johnson, when he won re-election 2 years ago, he did better in Waukesha County than Trump did. He survived by a point. I'm not sure any other Republican can do less than 59% in Waukesha County and still win statewide. So Republicans, their challenge is, how do you bump that number up in those WOW counties and maintain the engagement of these rural voters who came out for Trump? It's going to be fascinating to watch in the Supreme Court race this spring and the midterm elections of 2026. If they can, that's a pretty potent combination. But if they can't, that's a problem, because the more you turn suburban voters, highly educated, upper middle class voters, and up the scale economically, they turn out every election, not just in midterms, but in special elections, spring elections. They're always there. That gives Democrats an advantage if they hold those folks in those non-presidential years. So it's an interesting switch from when I started 25 years ago, and Republicans always had the advantage in midterm elections or special election because their voters were those suburban folks who turn out all the time.
There's so much to unpack there. I wanted to ask you, about Republicans' efforts in places like Milwaukee and Dane County, which you've mentioned. They had an effort called Lose by Less, and the idea was to compete in these heavily Democratic Milwaukee and Dane counties, having targeted outreach to voters who might be open to their message in these very blue counties. I want to know, did Republicans do this around the country? And, well, first let's start with how did it shake out numbers-wise in Wisconsin?
So the thing is, for this wave election that we had, we basically saw a switch of about 30-some thousand votes. Trump lost in 2020 by less than 21,000. He won in 2024 in Wisconsin by less than 30. So we're not talking a huge, massive shift of people in this state. We are still on the razor's edge. It's also worth noting that the red wave we saw around the country crashed a little bit softer here than elsewhere. Let's just look at Michigan and Pennsylvania. If you had told me a year ago that Wisconsin would vote more to the left than Michigan, Pennsylvania, if it happened 4 years ago, where they both went bigger for Biden than Wisconsin, I thought, well, that'd be odd. How's that going to happen? And I don't know Michigan or Pennsylvania as well as I do Wisconsin, so I'm not going to guess what happened there. But what I can tell you is in Wisconsin, Democrats have built a pretty good ground game. And that ground game is not going to win you an election when the environment is against you like it was this fall. But it can dampen some of a wave like it looks like it did. For Republicans, though, they had some successes in places like the UW-Madison campus, for example. Turning Point USA, a conservative group, really kind of big fans of Donald Trump. They targeted young voters, especially males, college campuses. That looks like it made a difference in a place like Madison, helped keep Harris below 75%. Now, will those first-time young male voters turn out for a Supreme Court race? People I talk to have their doubts. They're not known as the most reliable voters for Supreme Court races. Also, midterm elections, will they turn out in 2026 for the GOP nominee for governor, who's not Donald Trump? Maybe, but I would bank on them. My conversations are people, Republicans, who are worried, how do we keep those folks engaged? If they can do it, awesome for them. They have a nice coalition if they can. But if they can't, then what happens? And especially when the party in power in the White House almost always has a difficult midterm election. The exceptions have been the last 30 years, 2022 with Democrats and Dobbs' decision, 2002, the post 9/11 election, and 1998 when the Bill Clinton impeachment hung over everything. Otherwise, I can go back and go wave, wave, wave in most midterm elections in this country.
You're tuned into Capitol Notes. I'm WEWM's Maayan Silver, speaking with J.R. Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com. Okay, so you've been talking a little bit about Dane County with the University of Madison, the state capital, a lot of state employees, a lot of students. Milwaukee's a bit of a different animal. Can you tell me, with this Lose by Less effort that Milwaukee had been making with Milwaukee with urban voters, what are you seeing there, or are you seeing it as simply part of a red wave or a Trump wave? I mean, in terms of the ground game.
I have not gone super deep into Milwaukee ward by ward numbers. Been a little tired this week, not going to lie. But it does look like the Democratic margin of victory in, I think, 53 Hispanic wards fell like 10 points or something like that. John Johnson is a researcher at Marquette Law School, research fellow, I should say. And he looked at those. Black wards in Milwaukee slipped by like 2 points. So we didn't see a huge erosion, at least from John's research, among black voters in Milwaukee. But in Hispanic voters, definitely a change. Now, we saw that nationally. Exit polls showed Trump doing well with Hispanic voters, that Harris really kind of underperformed compared to Biden. So something is there. And what it suggests is, once again, people sometimes, wrongly, I would argue, lump all voters of a certain bloc as, they're all the same. They're not. And economic concerns drive things for a lot of people, regardless of your background, whether you want to talk race, class, zip code, on down the line. It seems like there was definitely an economic worry among a lot of voters, and that cuts across all lines, all demographics.
I think Republican strategist Bill McCoshen told me that it's fairly rare. I mean, it seems intuitive for Republicans to try to compete in the counties with the two largest populations and to try to cut their margins there and get more votes there. But he seemed to say that not a lot of, Republican candidates have tried to do that in the state, save maybe like Tommy Thompson and now Trump. What can you tell me about that?
Oh, one of my favorite stats in Wisconsin politics. 3 counties account for the majority, like 45% of the primary vote for Democrats in the typical statewide primary. Milwaukee and Dane, obviously. The third, Waukesha County. Now, that might seem kind of like odd. This is like a red county, Waukesha, the heartbeat of the GOP for years. But it's a big county. There are lots of Democrats there. Likewise, there are lots of Republicans in Milwaukee County and in Dane County. Trump stopped in Dane County and Waunakee as part of his visits around the state. He was in Milwaukee, obviously, in the closing days of the race. They competed there. Now the question is, can anybody else compete the way he did in Dane County? I haven't seen it, but you can bet Republicans took notes of how he did and are thinking, okay, how do we replicate this going forward?
And I want to ask you about the low propensity voters. These are people that don't vote often, but who the parties and campaigns think are open to their message. Sometimes these people have been labeled like zeros and ones in a voter file. That's the information that each campaign keeps on each potential voter. What do you know about how Republicans were able to go after this type of voter in Wisconsin, and did it work?
Looking at all 72 counties, Trump got a bigger share of the vote in all of them but like 4 or 5. 3 are the WOW counties. Another one is Door County, which has been like a bellwether. That went for Harris and went for Biden last time. But he improved pretty much everywhere. Urban, rural, not suburban, obviously, with the Milwaukee suburbs, of course. But everywhere else he did. So is that just because of the targeting? Is that because of the environment? Is that because of Trump himself? We'll be diving this for years and trying to pick apart what happened. But it is clear that Trump tapped into a concern people have about the direction of the country, and he got more votes in Wisconsin, likely because of it.
And so you can't necessarily attribute it to like Republicans' shift in tactics or their ground game or anything.
Well, Republicans, in talking to people, of course, this fall, they felt like the Republican ground game wasn't as strong, it was more fractured than Democrats. Now, when you win, it papers over everything. It cures all ills. No matter what happens, when you win, you did everything right. Again, if you dive into the numbers a little bit, the wave crashed a little bit lighter here than other places. Why is that? Is that because the Democrats had a better ground game? People think so, maybe. But you can't deny that, like Turning Point USA targeting college kids probably helped. Groups like Americans for Prosperity probably helped going out and targeting legislative races. Like victory has 1,000 fathers, loss only one, right? Old saying in politics. So there are lots of people contributed. But again, the environment to me, in my conversations, the number one takeaway is it was the economy. That's what drove everything. And all these groups that did turn out, all the messaging, it all rode that wave of people unhappy about the economy and what's going on in this country.
It's the economy, stupid. Not that you're stupid.
It always is. I've been called worse. Trust me. But, it's always driven by that. Now, there are exceptions. If the economy is going really, really well and everybody's really happy, which seems rare sometimes, right, in this country, then we focus on other things, right? Like 98, good example. The economy was humming along in the late 90s. The impeachment thing over that midterm election, different kind of environment. But when you see change, if economy is going well, the party in power does well. The economy's view is going negatively, the party in power is punished. It's happened time and time again. George Bush, 2008, the collapse of the stock market and the housing market. Republicans took a bath in 2008, right? Economy. 2010, concerns about spending. We hadn't really come out of that recession from 2008 fully recovered yet. The economy drove that. I mean, there's just example after example in this country of like that happening in midterm elections.
Thanks for the political analysis, JR, and thanks for joining me on Capital Notes.
Anytime.
That was J.R. Ross, editor of WisPolitics.com, speaking with me, WUWM's Maayan Silver. Listen for segments every other Monday with an extended segment on Lake Effect, and check out the Capital Notes podcast wherever you get your podcasts.